This is the ATI Podcast.
We can't have nice things if we throw them away. You stay broken when you're running your place. Love the loneliness that you create. You bend to break, you push away. We can't have nice things if we throw them away. You stay broken when you're running your place. Love the perception that you created. You bend to break until you're broken and jaded. I can't hold you.
Welcome back to the ATI Podcast. Barrett back here, host, and we've got a very special guest this week, JAY MAAS from Love Letter. Jay, we're so happy to have you on the show. This is something I've definitely been looking forward to. I know that I've been talking to Casey a little bit over at IODINE, even whenever you guys first released the single, and was like, man, this is killer. This project I'm very excited about. I know that you guys have technically been together a little bit longer, but I guess maybe a little bit of a name change, rebranding, if you will, with Love Letter. So how long has the Love Letter project been going now, officially, since like 2018?
Yeah, so the inception of the group of us would have been, I think our first release, that first EP, the Death of a Nation EP, was like 2018. That was intended really to be like all my favorite musicians just make an EP, right? Make a project. If you're watching the podcast, you can see I'm sitting in my studio. If you are not watching, I'm sitting in my studio. So it was easy for us, right? Like we can write everything, I can produce everything here. For those who don't know, that's been my full-time job for about 20 years now. So, it's kind of set up, ready to go. And then as the years ticked on and I started producing records for IODINE Records, I got to see what IODINE was doing. I was really impressed with the label, and I approached Casey. I said, hey, I've got this project that I kind of wouldn't mind doing more with. And we talked about it, and we decided it would be a good fit, which is great. We honestly couldn't be happier with how things are going, which is just amazing. You never know. You partner with someone, and you're friends, right? But like you partner with them, and you're like, I hope they are as professional as I hope they are. And this, in case, for sure true, which is awesome. But when it came to the name and it being Love Letter now, not Death of a Nation, as luck would have it, shortly after we released the Death of a Nation EP, maybe a year later, there was this documentary that came out, and it was sort of like a white nationalist documentary.
Yeah.
And it was very ironic that it was called the same thing, given the message of our band, couldn't really be further from that.
Right.
So we were getting messages on Facebook and, whatever, Meta in general, people misunderstanding who we were. They thought we were associated with that.
Right.
That, like I said, couldn't be further from the case.
Yeah.
So when we decided to put energy and effort into this, it was pretty clear that we should probably not be called that anymore. And I think too, that name sort of painted us into a box lyrically. And that's because at the time when we started the project, it was just going to be the project, And now it's sort of like
evolved. Because
of all those things and the rebrand and stuff, we were like, well, let's pick something that we love. No pun intended. And that opens things up. So it's not just like clearly a pigeonholed one sort of topic project. And so we're really happy with the new name. I'm really personally really happy with it. There's a couple things. I loved the alliteration. I loved the double entendre. It's like love letter. People are immediately going to think of like, a handwritten like love letter like that you'd give someone.
Right.
I kind of like thinking of it more as the act of letting love, which is sort of like, which I think the world can use as much as possible.
Absolutely.
Which is like, patience and empathy, even with people who don't necessarily agree with us. And I mean, that's really like the best and also hardest time to do that. And then it didn't hurt that my wedding song, I love this old emo band called Mineral. And so they have a song called Love Letter Typewriter. And Jesse and I got married. Our wedding song was Love Letter Typewriter. So that was like a little secret thing for me where I was like, yeah, I like this one.
That's incredible. Yeah, I didn't expect all those layers to adding the significance to the name change. And, sometimes when I talk to bands, sometimes they use band name generators or they throw random words together and vote on it, So I like to hear that there's a little bit more of a deeper meaning behind this name in particular.
it feels nice to have a name that actually like we care about and actually means something to us too.
Sure. Which is kind of funny, too. I understand, the documentary came out and everything in the former name of the band. But if anybody would actually have paid attention to the lyrics, like it has been very obvious that that's not where you guys stood as a band either, too, is completely in the opposite direction. More about inclusivity and, talking down all those bad things, so. It's just how it goes, though. People look at things at the face of the surface sometimes. And, I had an odd thing happen. Well, the band ISIS actually kind of had to change their name or identify as the band formerly known as ISIS. But I had one of my best friends named his daughter ISIS as well. And he had to legally change her name because we live in a very rural area in Missouri. And, he was getting kind of some heat and sideways looks from school teachers and unpreferential treatment and and that was not at all the intention. ISIS wasn't really a thing of prominence when his daughter was born quite yet either. So it's just sometimes those unfortunate things happen. You got to pivot.
So painfully ignorant, right? Like, what do they think? Like, my daughter's in the terrorist organization. She's a part of it. Yeah,
exactly. Yeah. It's unfortunate that you have to behave for others or change personal choices on account of others sometimes, but I don't think it's bad in this case in the sense that, again, back to our previous point that, there's a lot of meaning behind the new band name. So that excites me quite a bit. Yeah.
And it's just also way easier to say. We were sort of doing the pinch test. Like that name was really appropriate for that EP we did and for the lyrical content in that project, but now when people are like, hey, what's your band's name? And I say Love Letter, it sounds so stupid, but I don't get that weird sort of ick chill when there's death of it, you're
right.
You're like, what's the name of your Death of a Nation, Grandma? And she's just like, whoa.
Yeah. I know you kind of came up in this generation, you're formerly in Defeater for folks that don't know that. And, Quinn was in Verse as well, but, your guys' bands ran parallel and had some peers. At that time, there was a prominence in 3-name bands or 4-name bands. That was a whole thing for the longest time. And I even some of the bands that I used to play in and stuff kind of fell into some of the same trappings. And, I think that people intentionally try not to do that for those reasons too, and go with a shorter name and something that's a little bit more identifiable. But I love that you bring up the alliteration point as well. That's a thing that just subconsciously helps people remember your band name better, I think, in general, or anybody. Yeah. So, it's another, check mark.
Totally. Yeah, I'm with you 100%.
I mentioned it earlier, of course, a founding member of Defeater, as well as Quinn being a part of Verse. And I remember just, the first couple albums from each of those bands that I heard. And I think it's a valid point to bring up because you could kind of see some of that showing up on your guys' present day work. And personally, my favorite albums from each project, back with Verse, back around 2008, they had Aggression. And then you guys, Defeater, what caught my eye with your 2011 album was actually just the album cover artwork. The album artwork always kind of made me think of The Devil and God and Rage Inside Me, which is such a profound album for me when I grew up. Seeing that house, that white finish house on the cover of Empty Days and Sleepless Nights, it caught my eye immediately. I'm like, okay, I got to check this out because I don't know if this is intentional or not, just happenstance, but it's already hitting that nostalgia note for me. So, but funny enough, I had my primary instrument is drums, so that's what kind of makes this whole thing a little bit more important for me tonight. Is when I heard that record, I was like, I need to practice to this record. I had actually had probably a 6 or 8 month layoff of not playing just because circumstantial, living in places where I couldn't really practice and so on and so forth. So my sisters ended up renting a house and I was able to practice my drums there more frequently. And I threw that record on, and that's one of those records that I don't know if it's just muscle memory or what, but I can distinctly remember the drum parts. I go back and think about these pivotal records in my life that I've listened to as a drummer. And, just the drum playing on that record is outside of, every facet of it is fantastic, but the drum playing is something that I always look for initially. And that's something that really stuck with me on that album as well.
Yeah, I'm glad to hear that. Andy, who played drums on that Defeater record, that was so funny segue actually. So Empty Days and Sleepless Nights, we recorded and we started recording in September 2010. I remember because we started recording it on my 30th birthday. And Andy has always been, and I think always will be, a prolific drummer. It's not just Andy's technical ability, but it's the way he masterfully handles dynamics. And I think to your point, it's nice to hear you mention this, is the parts, the phrases, the drum phrases themselves are catchy, right? There are memorable. Like there's really high compositional value, in my opinion, to the way Andy plays drums. So that's awesome here. And so this love letter, everybody wants something beautiful. Everyone wants something beautiful. Our new LP. So this is the first LP that Andy and I have written together since Empty Days and Sleepless Nights. And it's been an absolute no-brainer. If I was going, after Defeater, I was, I had my son, and I was sort of like, cool, that was great. Like I got like all the check marks I could ever want. We got an Epitaph. I toured the world. I met my wife in Australia. It's like every band dude check mark, right? We did it. And I always knew I wanted to be a dad. And so I did that. I married Jessie, and I like to say I imported her. She immigrated here, and we had Dean and stuff. And then when I got the itch again, and it was like, I guess I'm going to make more music. There's just only one phone call, right? It's Andy.
Sure.
And actually, the inception of the band was Andy and I had talked about it a long time. I'll say his departure from Defeater was a set of circumstances where he had started a business called Green Vans that's still going great. And he got really, really busy with it. And Defeater was getting really, really busy at the same time. We were younger. I don't think things were handled as well as they probably could have or should have been back in the day. And so I personally had to call Andy and just kind of say, like, dude, like, I love you to death, but it's this isn't working. And so, after Empty Days and Sleepless Nights, while Andy and I stayed friends, we had to part ways with him in terms of like being a part of the band.
Right.
And I feel really fortunate that, speaking of letting love, right? I feel really fortunate that, Andy and I have been able to maintain, he was just here right before I started the podcast. So it's like that we've been able to be as close as we've been able to be throughout, things that I think would like cause bigger problems for other, maybe less solid relationships. And anyway, we're both really excited. We've talked about that a lot. This is our first LP. Like I said, we started recording that September 2010, and we started recording this love letter LP January 2023.
Wow.
So it was a big gap between.
And I don't know if it's like the COVID effect, but it just seems like that gap of time doesn't seem as long as it is until you start talking about it. Like it just went by so quickly. Even I think about the things in the late 2010s, even just like the present day, and I find myself saying like, oh, that was like 7 years ago. So that's another bizarre thing. I know earlier you mentioned too, Andy's very memorable, drum phrasings and catchy parts that he comes up with. And not that Andy sounds like this drummer, but I think it's an easy correlation to make because this drummer approaches drums in the same way. And that's, like a drummer like Dave Grohl, like, think about the flams, the iconic flams, on Nirvana records and things like that he's done. The fills, the iconic fills, just an incredible musician himself. But I think that Andy approaches drums in the same way that he may not always do what you would traditionally do, but like as a drummer, I just call it, I know this sounds a little like a sleight of hand to other drummers, but some drummers will just like mail it in on parts. Andy is finding a way to like do something very intricate, interesting, very technical, but at the same time not take away from everything else that's going on in the band. And that is a very hard line to walk, and he does it very masterfully.
Yeah, I can agree more with you. It's important to know when to not overplay, but even inside of those parts, like if you really listen to the parts, again, there's always some little thing going on where you're like, oh, that's cool. Like there's just like it could be a normal beat, but it's kind of not. There's always just that little extra nugget in there where you're like, oh my god, that little like whatever, like it's a little hidden double stroke roll or like whatever it is. It's awesome.
Another drummer that does that a lot, I forget his name now, but the drummer from Further Seems Forever, he always stood
Steven
out to me. Yeah.
Yeah.
He just always
Steven,
had like a unique approach to drumming as well, and always was like busy in parts that you would expect other drummers to just kind of like mail it in. So that's probably a little bit
I
more of
fell
a
in love with,
translatable comparison.
yeah. I fell in love with Steven's drumming way back on the Shai Hulud record they put out in '97, and then he was on The Moon Is Down. Obviously, I think all the Further Seems Forever records. But when I heard The Moon Is Down,
Yeah.
in 2001, Further Seems Forever. So, and speaking of IODINE, we're just keep tying things back in here. You know, I produced the Darling Fire for IODINE Records, and so I got right here for those of you watching the podcast. I got to actually full circle. I produced Steven's drums for that record here. Got to meet Steve, and so that was really cool for me too, because for years, I mean, really decades, I was like, we all were huge fans of
Definitely.
Steven's exceptionally unorthodox drumming, right? And
Yes.
he's a lefty, right?
Yes.
And he when he plays, it doesn't look like anything I imagined it would look like, you know. And
Yeah.
but he's super sharp, and you know, he could come in the control room, and he'll be playing the weirdest stuff. But if I'm like, you know, for E and you know, and I'm like, and on that where you hit this, he's like, yeah, no, like I can see him know exactly where I'm talking about, and so like he's equally like creative and calculated. It's cool.
It's very rare, again, to find drummers of this breed, and I can't speak to it enough. And, you know, so if somebody hasn't listened to Love Letter yet, you've got to check out Andy's drumming in particular. And if you're a big drum fan, you know, you want to learn something, I'm sure you can just sit down and listen to his parts in particular and learn something new. I know that I can speak from experience from a record he did almost, 15 years ago at this point, that Andy is an incredible drummer, and anybody can learn listening to him.
Yeah, I know. We should just release. I'm actually thinking about doing playthrough videos for the guitars and stuff, and I was like, it's a little bit of a bigger lift to film the drums, just because it's like,
Sure.
You need a bigger space, probably need more cameras and stuff like that. But the guitar players said they would do it, so I want to see if Andy will do it. But I have a feeling if we do release like playthroughs for everything, the drums will be the most viewed by a wide margin. You know, like
I
the
could see
guitar
it.
parts are cool, right? But it's nothing like watching the drums.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, because again, guy's busy constantly, man. It's a good watch for sure. You know what few like videos and stuff that you guys have out there online. Everybody brings great energy, of course. I mean, how can you not mention
Sure.
Quinn in particular? But it's hard for me not to watch Andy what he's doing, because I just know the technical wizardry that's going on, and I'm like, man, I got to see.
Wow.
And he's just so nonchalant. It's kind of annoying.
Matt from we just shot a video last week, like on a live video at the show we played in Providence, Rhode Island last week. We were watching Andy play. Matt, our other guitar player, walked over to me and he's like, there isn't anything that I do in life that I do half as well as he does that. And I was like, same.
That's great. That's great for sure.
Yeah.
One thing that kind of stood out right away, and we can get into various facets of the production of, kind of where you guys are going with this new record as well. But I guess, I should mention you guys just this week released the third single coming up on the album as well. Another incredible track. So you guys have got the 3 singles out in total. New Anthemic was the first one, of course. Misanthropic Holiday was the second. And then Meds and Taxes was the new one from this week as well. And I think you guys, I mean, it's very kind of obvious the direction musically that you guys are going on. I think that there's a little bit of, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, because you did the production, you would know better than anybody, but even from like what you guys were doing with the Death of a Nation EP, it seems like that was maybe approached a little bit more sparsely, whereas this, you guys are adding a lot of new wrinkles, particularly with guitars, I should say. I know like when New Anthemic came out right away, I'm kind of a sucker for like that organ type modulation sound with guitars, and that stood out right away. Like that just punched right through for me. And
Cool.
so that grabbed me right away. I'm like, okay, I'm signing up for what these motherfuckers about to do. I got to pre-order this immediately.
Yeah.
So that grabbed me right away. So was this like a calculated, or was this just a natural progression for you guys? What would you say?
Andy and I, we'll back up a little bit. So Andy and I have started a few bands together, and neither of us are actually like, and you can kind of probably tell by listening to like the records we've done together, it's like, we're not like traditional hardcore guys at all,
No.
So I really grew up like, I've said it like every podcast, but like, I grew up listening to Fugazi, and I like groovier, weirder stuff. Like we both love Manchester Orchestra. We both love Death Cab. I love Silver Sun Pickups. One of my favorite bands of all time is Russian Circles. And so like these like textured like layered, groovier, darker, at times darker, like stuff is where we're really at. And the Death of a Nation EP, I'm really proud of it, but it is like, we wrote and recorded that in like a weekend, like really, really fast. Like, cool, let's like whatever. When it came to this new LP, Andy and I were like, well, if we're going to do it, let's like actually do it. And so this is how Andy and I wrote Empty Days and Sleepless Nights. And it is, we continued the trend here for the new Love Letter record. And we start on day one in the studio with no songs. We don't have anything. So but this time, because we're older now and I'm a dad and because he's got a business and like whatever, we could have done it here. We did the EP here. I do records here every day, but just for like isolative purposes, we flew to my buddy Alex Estrada's studio in the Mojave Desert. It's a place called the Pale Moon Ranch. It is gorgeous. And so that didn't hurt. And we just flew there with Dave, who's now our bass player. Dave originally just came out to assistant engineer it. And then turns out he was the man for the job. So he ended up joining the band as well.
Heck yeah.
And we would wake up in the morning. Andy's really routine oriented, to put it lightly. And so he wakes up and it's like coffee and it's yoga and it's stretching and it's like whatever. And so Dave and I are kind of puttering around. I usually use the mornings to start writing new material just off the top of my head, whatever. But what would happen is we'd wake up, we'd go get coffee, and then we'd drive back. And, the downtown, like the closest Starbucks or coffee shop is 25 minutes from the studio. So you drive through the desert, through these hills. It's almost an hour, there and back. But I mean, with the stop, it is an hour. And so you're caffeinated on the way back. And we just decide to listen to records on the way to the coffee place and the way back. And we would walk in. We had the drums, one guitar rig set up and one bass rig set up on the other side of the room. We just start playing. And whatever we started playing, it would just be weird. Like we would just know, like someone would do something and you'd get that like, ooh, like, you know what I mean? Someone, oh, like, you look at the, you're like, hold on, ooh, and you do something and it's just like boom, 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 boom. And so these songs were really constructed really organically. For the most part, I had some that I wrote on my own, and most of those didn't end up making the record. What we found was that it was when I write things on my own to a click track or whatever it is, what can happen is they're very cerebral because I'm in control of everything and I'm just laying things, and then this, and then we'll stop here. And then I'm trying to like calculate and account for everything just on my own. And that's fine. I've written things that way. I wouldn't say it's usually my best work. I would say all the most popular Defeater songs are things that we wrote in this way. The entirety of Empty Days and Sleepless Nights was written this way. And now the new Love Letter record was as well. And it was leaning into like the more emotional aspects of writing. So if it felt right, let's do it. Right. And if someone has an idea, let's try it and whatever. But like, let's work quick. What I liked about that is that it became more about vibe and feel. And we really learned that was true because when we came home, we laid all the guitars in. We did 10 songs. We flew home and we started recording guitars here. We started recording vocals here. And we about 5-6 songs into vocals. And Quinn, all of the songs Quinn picked first, because Quinn has no idea, right? Like which ones were kind of a little bit more cerebral or which ones we wrote. Like the last song we recorded, we wrote in 40 minutes and had the drums tracked in another 40 and it was done, and so that'll be track 4, on the LP. And that was the first one Quinn wanted to sing over. And Andy and I, knowing kind of how the sausage was made, we were like, no way. Like Quinn picked that one. Like we didn't spend even 2 hours on that one, And so we were like, okay. And then as we got to like about 6 songs in, it became really evident that we started tracking vocals on track 7-ish, something like that. It became evident that Quinn was struggling a little bit more with getting the vocals how they wanted them, And so after a couple hours of working down here, right behind me, if you can see it, on that microphone, actually, we took a break, we grabbed dinner, and I just said, I don't think this is working. And I think all of the songs that you picked first were all of the songs that we didn't mentally belabor. Like they were all of the songs that we just got together. They happened. We hit the button. We documented it. And I came home and put guitars on it. Dave helped me with that. And like those were all the ones that Quinn picked first. And I think what's left, hilariously, and Quinn had no idea, right? All that's left are the cerebral ones. All that's left are the ones that like, I did on my own and I put to a click track and I like, all this stuff. Yeah. And, Quinn was like, no, don't worry. No, they're still great. And like, I'll figger it out. Don't worry about it. I looked at Andy and I was like, I think we need to write more. And he just goes, are we going back to California? And I was like, I think we're going back to California. And so right then and there, I grabbed my phone. I texted Alex, who owns Pale Moon Ranch. I said, what do you have? And there was a weekend available. And we booked tickets. We booked flights right away. I called Dave, who was on tour with another one, his other band, Still Motions. And I was like, I need you to fly to California again. And he was like, what? When? I'm like in 2.5, 3 weeks.
That's hilarious.
And he was like, fuck, my wife's going to kill me. And I was like, tell Jill I'm sorry. And we flew to California again. Same shit. We had nothing. And we ended up writing my favorite song on the record, track 5. It's called Unhousing Projects. But I love all 3 we did. And same thing, 3 days, we wrote 3 more and brought them home. All 3 of those were on the record, and they made all of the difference. And I think I learned a lot. I sort of proved something, by doing that. Was like, this is the correct writing process for us. And that was like basically empirically proven by Quinn was a control group, right? Like Quinn had no idea how any of this was made. And then just went towards what they naturally gravitated towards, And so me and Andy, knowing exactly how we made these, we were like, okay, yeah, I think I know what we have to do. But dude, we're in our I'm 44 in September, right? I'm 43 now. So it's like, if we have this opportunity to put out a record with a great record label, with, in my opinion, like the only lineup I would want, like all my favorite musicians playing the project, it's like, we have to feel great about every track. And so that's why we did it.
I love hearing the different approach with, just going by feel. I mean, I know you've had a history of doing that yourself with, prior releases, but I think that the benefit of that, of course, is that the first and foremost one that jumps out in my mind is you don't have too much of an opportunity to think about things. And that's actually a good thing sometimes, because I know I'm sure you're this way, Jay, just knowing your background and stuff, that you can probably be a perfectionist if you have a lot of time to reflect on maybe some of the things that you do. Whereas you're kind of putting yourself into a corner on purpose. It's like you're putting that pressure on yourself. And I'm a firm believer that pressure often generates diamonds, especially if it's, professionally motivated by yourself and initiated by yourself.
Yeah. I mean, I think about this too, right? Like, this art that we make is meant to be authentic. It's meant to be emotional, and it's also it's particularly meant to emotionally resonate, right? And so it's really difficult for things that are more cerebral by nature to have like some sort of like, no one's going to know that weird little like left you took in your own mind because this and because that, whatever. However, you don't get to do that when you're writing with just a couple other guys in the room. The cool thing about writing with, Dave and then Andy and myself is like, we've got 3 disciplines and none of them step on each other, right? So the moment Dave started writing with us, I didn't have to worry about root melodic structure anymore. And not having to worry about root melodic structure meant that he and Andy were sort of handling that. And now I became what I've always kind of prided myself on, what I really like being, is more like a tension artist and a texturist, which is like, now it's like, oh, cool. Like I hear these underlying things. And now, because I'm the mid-range instrument, right? Like, what tensions do I want to do? How far do I want to escalate them? If and when do we resolve, and how? That's like really fun for me, because if it's just Andy and I, like when we did Empty Days, I find myself doing a lot of, no one's gonna be able to see this on YouTube, but like these chords, right? Where like I'm always containing some root fundamental. And as much as I want to, and as much as all the cool tensions and weird upside down chords as I know how to play, like I have to maintain root fundamental whilst like adding tensions. And it, that anchor, I mean, they're cool chords, but it can be limiting. So if I have Dave as the root note anchor, right? Then, dude, I got the whole guitar. Let's go,
With you being in a very comfortable situation, everybody being very sure of themselves, their instruments, it frees everybody up to be more creative too. So that's kind of the other layer of this process that you're talking about. And I think a lot of people, I know, like even myself as an early musician, I remember these days thinking that there was like some manual or some like by the book thing that you do, by like how you approach songwriting or recording or whatever. And don't get me wrong, there's some like very fundamental things, of course, that you should do. However, not everything is right for everybody. So like this process that you're talking about might be right for you, but it might be right for, the next person or a different band. So it really takes kind of finding those people that kind of subscribe to a similar mindset as well, or have those abilities to follow those paths, which of course you found a way to do here in Love Letter.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more. And I would never suggest that like this crazy process where you go to the studio with 0 songs is like necessarily a good idea for everyone, but we have that luxury. And also like, we come back here and keep working on the record. And so the revisions don't end until right before mastering. So like, I remember Dave texted me and he was like, "What are you doing?" And I was like, "Adding leads." And he was like, "Well, I thought you were mixing." I was like, "Well, it's like part of mixing because I wanted, like, this is a perfect example, right? For the musicians who are listening, right? Like I wanted something to sparkle and elevate like through sort of like the mass, because we play in B, right? It's like through the low, like dense wall of stuff that's going on. What I realized is that like, yeah, I could EQ the lead that's already there, or I could grab a Fender amp and I could like, find a nice bright tone and I could just play a double on top of it. But instead of in the same register that I played it, I'll go up an octave, right? I'll go up an octave and get like real twinkly. And I'm effectively playing the same composition. And I'm not using it like it's a new guitar part, but I'm using it like it's EQ. And as a producer, I've learned this stuff the last 20 years. And when it's your own project, right, you don't have to ask for permission. So you just like,
right.
Yeah, I just went crazy with it.
I got to mention, too, and you've said this as well, you've got quite the extensive background when it comes to the production piece of things. Like even back in the mid-2000s, late 2000s, you were, recording albums as well. I believe you actually did a Verse album, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah,
did you
the
not?
one you mentioned. Yeah, I produced Aggression.
Yeah, so, and I again, like what I talked about earlier, some of the familiarity that you'll hear in the 2 albums that I like, in particular from Verse and Defeater, I think you show up here, but that's quite the history. And then I guess you guys were both at various points on Bridge 9 as well, which I feel like is like a record label that is not as talked about as much today, but a lot of like influential, great artists on. And it's like, if you sit back and look back the historical acts that have been on there, it's just crazy to think of that catalog, that roster that they had at various times.
Yeah, I mean, I think both Verse and Defeater had, I was producing records for Bridge 9. So that was really great because it was easier for me to start the conversation up with when I started Defeater, because it was like, I'm already doing Verse and I'm already doing Cruel Hand and different records for them at the time. And I was doing stuff for Death Wish at the time too. So I knew the Death Wish guys. I was pretty well, acquainted with them. And then also like, they didn't live that far away. So I would just love to pop in, I'd just pop in and get to know everybody. Sure. And it was just serendipitous. I love Chris Wren, who owns a label to death. He was, without Chris's backing and everything that he did for Defeater would not have popped off like it did. And I would not have been playing a show in Sydney, Australia, where I met my wife. And, so like, I'm really, really grateful for that. And Chris actually met, I was married once before. So Chris actually met his wife, Kat, at my first wedding. And so Kat is now the label manager over at Bridge 9. And they just signed a new act that I produced called Heavy Hex. And that just came out. And we did that record here and I got to produce that. And it was very, very cool, very full circle to like be producing a record for Bridge 9 again, and then have Kat be, because Kat's an old friend, but like to have Kat be the label manager who actually is like, largely responsible for the sort of like signing Heavy Hex. And so, but Defeater and Verse, no question, that was a wonderful time to be at Bridge 9, because Half Heart was going, Polar Bear Club was going, Strike Anywhere had joined the label. It was stacked. Yeah,
I was heavily into Half Heart and Polar Bear Club as well back in the day, man. Oh man, so many phenomenal artists throughout that roster's tenure for sure. Other bands and stuff that you've produced in the past, though, too, folks might not realize as well. You've got Counterparts, I believe, Title Fight, Bane, right? So kind of quite the eclectic mix of bands across various genres as well. So you're kind of like a Swiss Army knife producer in many ways, I feel like.
Yeah, well, I've been through boot camp, over the years. It's, doing something like Defeater and Bane is obviously on the heavier side. I grew up as an emo kid, right? Like I was, in 1998, I was 18. And so that's when Braid, Frame and Canvas came out. That's like, you know what I mean? So I'm listening to Braid and Mineral
Yeah.
and Promise Ring and the Get Up Kids, and so like that
Yeah.
was my bread and butter, was that style of emo at the time. Faster stuff too, Saves the Day and all of that. And so, but what got me, I guess, acquainted with heavy music was the first touring band I joined. I was 17, and I met. This is a kind of a funny story. For my senior year of high school, my mom, we had to move out of the town that I was graduating from. And so we were about a 25-minute drive away from the town. I was driving at the time. I was a senior. I had my license. I had my own car. And I was still sort of convinced at the time. I started skateboarding at 5 years old. So I was still kind of convinced at the time that like I was going to try to make a go of skateboarding. Now, mind you, I'm 6'4" and had no idea that my knee had other ideas for me. But
Yeah.
at the time, I was young and healthy and skating nonstop. And so kids don't do what I say, not as I do. I would
Sure.
drive to school, but enough of the time I would cut class and I'd go to the skate park. And so I would just skate as much as possible. And I was 17, what I mean? And
Sure. Absolutely.
yeah, 16, 17, whatever. Anyway, between junior and senior year, I had to go to summer school for English because of that. And I'm sitting in summer school, straight edge at the time, and I'm sitting there and there's this guy in summer school. He's got one of those late 90s, like hardcore guy hemp necklaces with the 3X beads. It's like super classic, like straight edge thing. So I saw him and I'm like, dude,
Right.
that cannot be a fluke. And I went up to him in summer school and I was like, yo, are you straight edge? And he's like, yeah. And I was like, cool. And he goes, do you like Candiria? Now, I didn't know who Candiria was at the time, but I lied. I was like, yeah, I love Candiria. And then immediately had to go like buy a Candiria CD, right? But he's like, cool.
Get
He's
caught
like,
up.
yeah, I was like, this guy's going to ask me about Candiria next time I see him. I need to know what I'm talking
Yeah.
about. Yeah. And,
Right.
and so he's like, you should come to my band's practice. I said, okay, dude, we didn't have cell phones yet. Whatever. He's like, we got out of school. He's like, yeah, I'm going after school. Follow me. So I'm just following this dude, this straight edge dude. Anyway, this guy ends up, his name's Mark Castillo. He's gone on to play drums for Bury Your Dead, Between the Buried and Me, Amur, all these bands. But he was in this band called Piecemeal from the Massachusetts area. And I just hung out with those guys because I was from a really small town. And, I was into Fugazi and Minor Threat, No Effects, more like punk, fast skate type stuff. And
Sure.
I had never heard metalcore before. And so these guys were playing like late 90s metalcore. And they had a tour coming up and it was right after I was graduating high school. And I was 17 when I graduated. And the singer, Kevin Baker, who's now, he still is the singer for The Hope Conspiracy. So like they just put out a new record. So he was in Hope Conspiracy, All People Die. But before that, he was the singer of this band. And so Kevin pulls me outside, right, into the hall. I don't know if you've seen Kevin before. I might be tall, but Kevin's fucking huge, right? And muscle huge, right? Yeah. And so, and I'm 17. I think he's 23 at the time. These guys were a little bit older than me. And he points at me. We're having band practice, right? I'm not in the band yet, right? At all. I didn't really want to be in the band because I didn't really like metal. And he like pointed to the door, and he is like to go outside. So I went outside. We're in the hall. And Kevin goes, "You're going to play guitar for this band." And I go, "Oh, I'm more into like Sunny Day Real Estate and like this type of stuff."
Yeah.
Right. And he listens to me and he just goes, "You're going to play guitar for this band." And I go, I'm going to play guitar for this band.
I love it. Pure intimidation.
Yeah, I'm completely intimidated by Kevin, now the vocalist of Hope Conspiracy, right? And I was like, okay. And so we kind of walk back in and everybody's like, talk to Kevin, and I was like, oh yeah. And and it's like, sweet. So you got to learn the songs. And there was all these crazy, like, in metal, right? Like I'm a punk. I was a punk player, which is to say a bad player, right? And at the time,
and very low entry barrier.
Yeah, exactly. Like just very simple stuff. There's all of these new techniques I have to learn. I have to learn alternate picking. I have to learn I have to learn trem picking. I have to be really accurate. Like I have to learn string skipping. Like I have to learn all of this stuff. And we leave in less than a month for my very first tour. So anyway, Mark was the drummer of that band. And a lot of those guys went on to do different stuff. Obviously, I went on to do Defeater and now Love Letter. Kevin went on to do Hope Conspiracy and All Pigs Must Die. Mark went on to do
Yeah.
Between the Buried and Me, Bury Your Dead, Amir, all of that stuff. And it's just, dude, such a funny little serendipitous thing, right? It's like I failed English.
Yeah,
I failed
you're
Miss
out of quite
Frisbee's
the
English
melting
class.
pot in area for sure. There's
Yeah,
so many
totally.
acts and artists just out of that whole scene and area that you're in. I'm a big time Converge fan myself, so I know you've
totally. And I got to know Kurt.
brushed up against those guys. Yeah.
Yeah, the reason I record, honestly, is because my first real recording experience was with Kurt, and I was 19, and I just saw Kurt's studio, and I was all this gear and technology, and I was like, this
Right.
process is awesome, and I was a computer science major, but I loved music, and I was like, oh, dude, this is it, like tech and music as a thing. I was like, sign me up. I bugged the hell out of Kurt for years and years and years, and he was gracious enough to, give me a key to God City, and I assisted him on a bunch of records, and become a close friend, and pull no punches with the criticism on some of my mixes at the time, which, for what it's worth, needed no punches pulled criticism. So even though I come from this melodic background, you talked about the sort of the width or whatever, the diversity of my work from going from Bane to a Citizen or a Title Fight, right? It's because I love the more melodic stuff, but I went to metal hardcore boot camp.
And he's such a knowledgeable guy too, as well. It's easy to take for granted because he's such a nice, unassuming guy in general. Even I've seen so many Converge shows. You go to a Converge show, and he seems like the person that's probably, I don't know, if you've never seen Converge or never seen what he looks like, he probably seems like the least person that would be a member of that band. So quiet, really.
Yeah.
And, and then that aggression that comes out whenever, the volume gets turned up. I mean, just an incredible artist too.
Yeah, no question. Incredible artist, hyper intelligent. Obviously Converge is just a seminal act now, and none of that would exist without Kurt.
Absolutely. A part of what you're well known for, that is, I should say, is, folks might not realize this as well, is you've got a lot of educational videos out there when it comes to the engineering piece as well.
Yeah.
I got your own YouTube channel, I know, and, I've dropped in on some of the videos, and very good material, very good stuff, even in short bites, if you're just wanting to do a little quick lesson and step up your production game. If your channel's a gold mine for entry level people, just a lot of cool videos that you have out there, easily accessible for folks.
Yeah, I try to keep it that way, right? Because I run a site called Fast Track Academy, which goes deeper. I also, anyone listening who wants to up their game, I also personally mentor engineers, and we've taken a lot of guys full time now. And so I've always had an aptitude for communication, I think, and I love talking about the things that I'm passionate about and the things that I know about. So another perfect marriage, tech and music was one perfect marriage, but I think also communication and wisdom, of having done this for as long as I have now, has been another kind of perfect union. So yeah, I enjoy making that stuff, and I try to think of it from a perspective of if I didn't know all the things I knew and I needed something explained to me, how would I want it explained to me? And I try to explain it that way.
Then that's certainly something I can lean into and highlight even more so, is just the quality and efficiency of your communication in those videos. It make it very easy for people to understand and learn. And you even address very quickly, you'll address some tropes maybe with recording and kind of dispel things as well. Again, back to the drum thing. I selfishly jumped around to a lot of the drum videos that you had out there in particular, of course. And, a lot of the things that I heard you saying in a much more polished way were things that I would hear from any Steve Albini videos that I would record, even, when it comes to mic placement and things of that ilk. So rest in peace, Steve. He's absolutely one of my favorite people ever in music. Yep. But, again, that really gravitated toward me and my interests, of course. So if you're thinking that Jay is just going to have just an overall God's eye view, he gets kind of particular with instruments and how to approach certain instruments and recording, and gives tips. So I can't recommend checking out, all the resources that you have out there too enough. So leaning back into Love Letter, of course, you guys have the new album coming out here at the end of the month. I believe it's the 28th.
That's right.
IODINE Recordings, of course. And we've already got 3 singles out right now. While all of the singles individually are obviously very distinctly their own songs, you guys do you have that consistency as songwriters, as performers of your instruments and the music that you guys are composing? That is a fluidity there, even, and I know that even looking at kind of the advancement on the track listing, that these songs aren't necessarily going to be in order, which is not unusual, with single releases. But I'm really excited to see what's filled in between those tracks because, as you mentioned earlier, kind of the creative process that's went behind this and kind of doing what felt right in the moment and chasing those ideas, that has me very intrigued for what else might be in store for us as listeners.
Well, thanks. It's diverse. So the people that are close to me, I've got old friends, right, who were around when I started Defeater, and just friends that I trust to hear my work and know my work well. Like what I keep hearing is that people are going to be surprised, and that the diversity of the content, everything is, I think, really accessible. And like you said, like it's not going to be like, oh wait, what's this song? This doesn't even sound like the same band. It's not like that. But I was not afraid to use all of the colors on my palette. It's like one thing that can happen. Later Defeater, I think, fell victim to this, was like put out records, people start getting an idea of like what your band sounds like, and then the guys in the band start having opinions about, like the types of records that like you should be writing, and so I think it's really, really dangerous when those suggestions can be confining, so it's like, I think you want the biggest playground, right? And the moment you start kind of clamping in on that box, it's like really easy to sort of write things that feel a little derivative. It's a little easy to things that just like, just retread the same steps you've already done. And to get away from that, here's something I've learned. And I think for any artist that's sort of listening to this and maybe scared to like, do something weird, it's, you're going to sound like you, right? Like the creative tendencies that just exist inside of like you as an artist, and like your creative preferences, and like the way that you express yourself musically, those things are going to permeate every damn thing you write, whether you want it to or not. And that also goes for me as a producer too, right? Because being a producer is just an extension of my creativity. So because it permeates that, there's a freedom in that, because now you fucking write whatever you want, right? Because you get weird with it, because chances are, as long as you feel strongly about it and you like it, no matter like chord voicings you don't normally use, tones you don't normally use, time signatures you don't normally use, like my gut tells me that when this thing is all put together, the record's going to be better for it, because the pacing of the record has now expanded in a way where your peaks are higher, your valleys are deeper, and when you listen to the whole thing as one contiguous piece of music, right, the roller coaster ride is just that much more exciting for it.
It's something that I can hammer in even more so too here is, you don't want to paint yourself into a corner as an artist, and you don't want to become a parody of yourself, certainly. And I know there's like a lot of younger artists that I've talked to in the past, or musicians that are just getting started and have asked me for advice. For what that's worth, I don't know anything. But what I do often tell them is that just write music that you personally are a fan of. Don't worry about what other people have to say, unless it's, an opinion that matters to you and you're just looking to maybe fine tune something. Outside of that, make sure that you're writing music that you personally would want to hear as a fan, because that's where we all started, right? Is fans of music. And if you're playing stuff that you don't like, I mean, it's pretty simple, right? You're going to grow to have a distaste for it. And, and that's certainly not a place that you want to ever push yourself toward as a musician either. But, I think it's most important to always write music that you can be a fan of. Again, you'll never know the heights that you'll achieve. And, with you being creative and you chasing these leads and ideas like you guys did, even going into this album, it could take you to new heights. And, if you start putting shackles on yourself creatively, you can't achieve those heights. It's just pretty simple.
Yeah, I agree. And I don't think anyone wants me to write a Defeater record again. There's enough, right? It's like, now what?
Sure.
Now what are we doing? It's like, it's been long enough. Now what? And so there's going to be, like I said, there's going to be things about it that is clearly my writing style. And I don't think it's going to be like insanely surprising, but I think it'll be good surprising enough.
And I know that you guys have got some shows, I know in the future. Kind of tell me what maybe things are looking like development-wise. I know some of that you may not be even able to reveal, even if they are ironed out. What is shows and performances and promotion of the album looking like in the future?
Yeah, so we're hammering some more shows, but we do have some stuff coming up. We fly next month We're flying to Florida. We're playing a one-off show in Florida, but we're playing with Crime and Stereo in Orlando, which is dope. We
Very
love
cool.
them. Yeah. And I have one I can't talk about yet, but it's with something we're really excited about. And then I got a bunch of stuff I can't talk about, which is, I would say, stay tuned, because there's and people who have been waiting for us to go international, that's in the works. So that, which is just a trip, dude. Like, growing up as a kid, you never think you're going to leave your hometown, let alone travel the world, especially travel the world playing music. And then when I became a dad and stuff, and I thought, those days were behind me, you kind of just put them over there, and I was like, that was awesome. And then here I am on email chains this week about doing it again. So
it's incredible. And it kind of goes into, I've had the good fortune of talking to many artists here, even particularly like this season, toward the end of last season of our podcast, that have been in the game for 20 plus years. And maybe they were in a previous project and they thought that things were over and they started up something new. And now this new opportunity came, and it's grown into this animal that they couldn't have even predicted. I just love, I think it's anybody with a decent bone in their body loves a good comeback story. Not to say that you ever went away in particular, but it's rare to get those opportunities with one band, let alone, here you are with a second band that I have nothing but high expectations for. And, everything that I've heard has been fantastic to this point. And I'm sure you're going to achieve at least equal, if not further heights than you have in the past. But I just love seeing it. I think it's very inspirational to see things like this.
Oh, I really appreciate it. And it is looking that way right now. And that feels really good. It feels good to get the feedback. It feels good to get like the opportunities again. And we only played a handful of shows. They've all been so fun. And, we played one last week. I was driving home with Andy, who we mentioned earlier. And we were like, oh, fuck, like, this is kind of awesome again. Yeah. So we're excited.
Yeah, the live performance piece of it was, don't get me wrong, everything about being in a band has its positive points, but the live performance piece was always the most important to me, because nothing's like, you can put something out online and let it live out there in the web space, if you will, and yeah, you can get some likes and you can get some streams and you can see your counts and all that stuff, but I don't think there's anything like playing in front of people and getting that instant reaction, that instant validation for what you're doing.
Yeah, and I would say, like, for me, the thing, I grew up going to shows like we all did. I remember how I felt at shows that were really like important to me, like from a just developing my identity to like emotional relatability and all of this stuff.
Sure.
And there's an authenticity to when you play live, if it's going well, where you look at the people that you're performing for, and it's very easy to tell, like, if they're like, this is cool, or if they're like locked in, and they're like,
yes,
no. Like, and
yes,
when you see that, it's just, I don't know. It's like, I'm doing my parts, I'm doing my thing, but it's like this intangible that like I connect eyes with someone just for like just a second, and I like know that we just shared a thing and that we're both like, yes, like this tension is real. Good luck finding that anywhere else. That's really hard to find.
Yes.
So it's addictive because it's just so rare and it feels so cool.
It most certainly is. Yeah, there's a bit of an adrenaline rush that comes with that on the live performance piece. And, I've been fortunate enough to have many opportunities in my life that I've been to shows as either as a fan or as a person performing, and that has been the case. And that is the thing that I chase most. It's like the dragon that, never settles, that you're always chasing. I feel like as a musician, at least for me, is that experience. And, I kind of touched on it earlier, but of course, COVID kind of took that away from us all briefly. And I think even me, as a guy who's almost 40 myself here, I am going back and cherishing and desiring those experiences even more so now, just because when very real things in life happen, they kind of put things into perspective.
No question.
And it reminds you that, these moments are limited in life, and, you got to do what makes you feel good, makes you feel happy. And music's always been that refuge for me in particular.
Yeah, I think we probably share that.
We've mentioned Quinn a few times here as well. One thing about your band I have to highlight, and Quinn as a vocalist, of course, is their ability to always kind of cut through what's happening musically. I'm a big fan of all types of vocals. I always think that there's a special, we'll say, characteristic or trait in a vocalist who is a screamer, and you can understand everything that they're saying with such clarity. And Quinn is one of those people, has been able to do that throughout their entire career. It's incredible what they're able to produce. And man, again, it's on full display here with Love Letter, so I can't highlight that piece of your band enough either.
Well, thanks. I was talking to Andy about this actually. When Andy and I, did that New Year's Eve together, and I woke up and I thought, maybe we'll put something together. I asked Andy what he thought, and he was into the idea. And I texted Quinn. I said, "Hey, what do you think about doing a project?" I remember their response exactly was, "I thought you'd never ask." And Quinn is my favorite, I guess you'd call it, aggressive vocalist ever. Right? I never expected to be in a band with Quinn. I've recorded so many phenomenal vocalists, so no one take offense to this, but just personally, after producing Aggression by Verse and getting to see, Quinn perform live, that was my Everest, and so when I knew Andy was on board and I had my favorite drummer ever, and Quinn was on board, it's exciting, right? And it's a little bit, you got to pinch yourself where we really, in my opinion, have a masterful team here. And it's just so awesome to let everyone in the band is so good, so experienced that you don't tell anyone what to do. And if you did, you just make it worse, right? Like,
sure.
You just let Andy it up, and you just let Quinn it up. And you can trust that these people aren't going to settle for phoning anything in, to use your phrase from earlier, right? Like, and there was times, it happened right here where we're recording the vocals for Love Letter, where, Quinn would do a performance. In my mind, I'm thinking, oh, you cannot beat that. That was insane. Right. And Quinn would be like, play that back. And I'd be like, dude, that was awesome. Right. And I'd play it back and they'd be like, again. And I wouldn't delete it because I can't see what I'm doing. So I'd mute it and I'd drop it to a different track. And I'm like, yeah, right. You're never beating that. Right. And I was wrong every time, right? Lo and behold, Quinn would work at it until not only did they get one that was just, in my opinion, objectively and emotionally better, but it actually made me understand what about the old one wasn't quite right. And because you can't, even as a producer, like I'm getting things in linearly, right? So I have not yet seen the entire vision as it exists inside of like the artist's mind. Quinn being the artist in this case. So like, I'll get one and be like, oh, that was unbelievable. Right. But then when you get to like zoom out and see like, or hear like the whole, the whole narrative, you're like, oh, now I completely understand why that other line, while performed well, wasn't exactly right. This is just awesome for me, so, and I'm with you on the lyrical diction, right? Like my favorite aggressive vocals is like, if you're going to scream about something, I would like to know what you're talking about, Right?
Yes.
Personally, like, and there's all kinds of different genres of music where like the vocals are like highly unintelligible, and that's fine. That stuff honestly is not so much for me. It's not my thing. But like, I think of it more as like, I love like At the Drive-In, where like, it's shouty, but like, never mind. To be fair, At the Drive-In, a lot of times I have no idea what Cedric's talking about. Like, I don't know what the lyrics mean, but I can understand the lyrics, and it draws me in more.
Right.
I love the band dearly, but like with Quinn, it's like more narrative driven, right? So like, there's a clear and obvious point and story, and like there's a subject matter that's being laid out, and being able to hang on the inflection and the word choice and everything, for me, is just like, that's like the whole ball game. I love it.
Yeah, there's two follow-up comments I want to make up about Quinn too as well. And first and foremost, you've mentioned this too, the fact that there's kind of a narrative to the lyrical content. There's a message or a meaning behind what's being said. It's very clearly heard and understood. I can go down two different paths with that comment. The first is, there's a lot of bands out there with screamers, of course. We've talked about that lyrical diction, being able to understand what they do or don't say. That actually, even early on as a fan, like, I'll admit this, like, Converge, an all-time favorite band, I got the tattoo here to prove it. Top 10 band all time for me, probably top 5. And those early Converge records, even as a young guy, I could not understand anything Jacob Bannon was saying.
Sure.
I had to get the lyric book out and read them. And once I realized the lyrical content, I'm like, okay, yes, I love this band even more so because of this. It got easier over the years. I think, production had a lot to do with that, evolving with them over time. But Quinn as a vocalist, just to kind of do a compare and contrast here, is a vocalist that you've always been able to understand what's being said, but also has that same substance. where I can compare the two is that there is a very special and meaningful point being made with every song that's often narrative driven, lyrical content wise. And it's not fallen into the trappings of, like, we'll just say it, a lot of hardcore bands is, bro, you stabbed me in the back, or, my girl cheated on me. Like, those are like the two big themes, and like, we're going to get our revenge, and here's perseverance coming at you, right? Don't get me wrong. People have things happen to them, and, sometimes through music, of course, that's how they express those emotions and work those things out, and that's fine. But hardcore has fallen into these trappings, unfortunately, and hardcore adjacent acts where, that's a lot of the themes of the lyrical content, and everything's about beating somebody's ass or getting revenge. And, there's a lot more meaningful things happening here, in particular with Quinn's lyrical content.
I know. I mean, Quinn is one of the most highly informed, emotionally intelligent people I've ever met in my entire life. And so just what a beautiful double dip blessing that they also happen to want to present all of that immense thought and consideration into an artistic product that others can enjoy. So it's incredible.
Yeah, and another comment that you made during the recording progress too, and I could kind of see this laid out, because what I've really started to notice that Quinn's developed over the years too is like the ability to shift into a different gear, whether that's just modulating the voice a little bit differently or whatever the case is, even just a little wrinkle like that, or even going up toward the end of the phrasing with like some distress in the voice. Like, there's so much of that I'm hearing now here with Love Letter, even more so. There's inklings of it in their work in the past, but I mean, it's on full display with every track. Even as the chorus loops back around, sometimes it's not necessarily presented or attacked the exact same way. There's little wrinkles throughout and nuances in the performance as well that just really intrigue me as a listener.
I'm glad that you caught on to that, because we not just like I would say, the wider, I guess, dynamic range of Quinn on this record, because I would say some of Quinn's most aggressive vocals are on the Love Letter record, but also least. But that when the chorus comes back around, we didn't just copy and paste any choruses, right? Like this whole thing is, and I don't think we did with guitars either. Like this whole thing is little micro tensions that are different, and even though it is a repeating chorus, it's going to feel familiar, but it's not the same,
Yeah, I love it because, while there is some of kind of the traditional format in song writing and composition in the sense of, like verse, chorus, or whatever, you guys are adding extra layers and wrinkles, just as you've highlighted here, where it's not copy and paste, from verse to chorus and so on, or a bridge. There's a little bit of something new, and I think that adds to the listening experience, just out of, besides just being a musician and appreciating like what's happening and what I'm hearing.
Yeah, well, I mean, a fundamental aspect of this type of art, in my opinion, is authenticity, right? So it's like
Absolutely.
you can't hear like a distinct inflection voice crack in chorus one, and then it's a copy and paste inflection voice crack in chorus two, and it's kind of like it cheapens it, right? So it's got to be all. It's got to be all real.
Jay, man, I've appreciated the time that you've given us tonight, and all the various topics that we've hit on. Just real briefly on the way out, there's just a few little random questions that I want to hit you with, just to kind of get people to know you a little bit better. Me being kind of, a podcast guy, and I produce all of our own stuff too. Mm-hmm. I always like asking people that are engineers or producers of any type, what is kind of a big pet peeve for you as a producer? Like, what is something like immediately that kind of maybe gets under your skin as a producer? What are do's and don'ts, maybe, and more so the don't end of things?
On don't.
Yeah.
So I'll call them out, because at this point it's just a funny joke. There's a band whom I love from Australia called Our Past Days, and they flew me across the world, and we rented like $1 million or more multi-million-dollar studio to track drums in, and we were producing the rest of the record at one of the guitar players from Amity Affliction's spot, and I flew for like 27 hours, and I'm, you know what I mean, like and I showed up, and they forgot to write songs, but like in a bad way, where like it wasn't like yeah, this is our process. It was like I played too much Call of Duty, and so
oh my,
and so on day one we're doing pre-pro, And I realized we don't have the songs, so we have to book a drum. We book a little spot for the drummer to rehearse. I'm getting all the ideas. We're writing shit on the fly, and we basically wrote the vast majority of that LP within a couple days. And I had to
Oh my
call
goodness.
this like crazy expensive studio and see if we could push it back into later in the week and everything, because we just weren't ready. And fortunately, we could do that. I mean, the studio was nuts. The studio had a helicopter landing pad. You know what I mean? Like,
Oh my goodness.
yeah, it was like crazy. Tennis courts, right? And
That's
so,
wild.
so if I was going to say
Wow.
maybe don't fly your producer across the world and forget to write the record. That's a pretty big
Yeah.
don't. Yeah. Other than that,
Yeah.
and we still got through that.
Pretty
for what
sound.
it's worth. I actually love the record, but I would say other than that, don't be anything except honest. You know, and if
Yeah.
honest and humble, if you can be, because being disingenuous and braggadocious and
Yeah.
whatever, it's not gonna make your record any better.
No.
Yeah.
What good is it doing?
Yeah, it's just gonna make you look like a tool to everyone in the studio anyway. So
Absolutely.
you know what I mean?
And there's always somebody better than you, regardless how good you think you are. So coming things with a little bit of humility is always,
yeah, exactly.
my suggestion.
Yeah, so that's fine. I would say maybe the only real pet peeve I have actually on that topic is if I see someone in the band who hasn't recorded yet be like an overbearing prick to the other members of the band, and then they but let's say, just for example, this isn't a real example, but like let's say they're the bass player, right? And then it comes time for them to track bass, and they've already been like a complete nightmare, right? To the drummer
Right.
and the guitar player and everything like that. And then like they suck at bass. You know what I mean?
Yes.
That like
Yes.
I very rarely will punish someone, but if I've witnessed you
Yeah.
punish everyone else and you
Yes.
can't back up your shit, like you're about to have a terrible experience with me.
That's hilarious, and I'd love to hear that.
Yeah.
I knew exactly what example you were going to run with, just because unfortunately I've kind of experienced some of those things in the past. That's great.
I'll give you a
That's
lot
great.
of shit. I'll be like, man, like you're so good at running your mouth. Why can't you play to a click?
There you go. There you go. I love it. JD, are you particularly fond of any, I'm sure that you probably have, your own, not necessarily superstitions, but we'll say preferences as a musician. So do you have like allegiances to certain guitars or pickup pedals or amps, or, are you pretty flexible with all that?
My other guitar players, or bass player and guitar player in Love Letter, are so much better. You'd think that I'd be like the guy, you know what I mean? Because it's like you make records and whatever.
Sure.
Here's what 20 years of producing's really told me. It's all about performance, and it's all about composition and performance, right? I've had people come in and bring like crate fucking tube amp, or sorry, crate like solid state, right? Like,
yeah,
and they swear by it, and I'm like, I don't think we should use this. You know what I mean? Like just like,
right.
like me, like 10, 12 years ago, I'd be like, no way. These days, I'd give it a chance because I've been surprised that the art and the translatability of that art is in the hands of the performer at all times. Now, mind you, I don't like playing through guitar sims. I don't like playing through plugins. They don't work with my playing style. But that's why other people have great success with it, and that's fine. I don't know what's in frame, but I've got like 3 beautiful tube amps right to my right now, and so that's my preference. And I know what I like. Like for Love Letter, I play a Soldano Avenger. It's my favorite amp for that, but probably my favorite amp of all time. If you can see it, it's like Bad Cat Lynx. I absolutely love that amp, but it's not quite right for Love Letter. So it's not here right now, but like the Soldano is a perfect match for me. But my other guitar player, Matt, he tried to play the Soldano. It doesn't work for him. It's all about the player having the right equipment. I'm shockingly unfussy. Like for example, I think it's right. It's not one of these Marshall. It's yet another Marshall. The guitar amp that we used for, I would say 80+% of the guitars on the Love Letter record was a late 70s JMP Marshall, which is a phenomenal amp, but not because I was like, we need to use a JMP. It was because it was plugged in. And so I plugged into it and I started playing and I went, yeah, sick, cool, let's go.
Nice.
Yeah.
Very nice. The other guitar player, I know, like in the live videos that I'd watched, and sometimes it's hard to tell in the the pan and the screen that you get in some of these live videos.
Yeah.
Do they run like a ABY setup? I thought I saw like a like an orange cab set up next to like a Marshall 212 maybe, or a combo
Yeah, I
amp,
think
or
one of those cabs might have not been active in the last show, but Matt
okay.
he brought. So Matt is insane with gear stuff. Davis too. They both are kind of in different ways, but like Matt, the other guitar player, always buying new stuff, learning, knows everything about like the impedance of this pot with this pickup and the coding on this string, and like he's got this this like brown box, this voltage regulation box, because like if you let the amp draw in X amount of watts from the wall, it's like 120-ish or whatever. But the way it sounds when I limit the voltage to the tubes at 117 is like, he's like, yeah, I like playing my amp at 117 watts. And I'm like, dog, I plugged mine into the wall. I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, he loves that. Yeah.
That's hilarious.
Yeah.
So how long have you been playing guitar altogether, Jay?
Well, it's going to make me sound really, really old. Fuck.
You're as old as you feel, man.
No, it's not doing me any favors either. But I've been playing guitar for 31 years. So I started when I was 12, and when I guess it's almost 32 this Christmas. And my friend in middle school, Matt Whalen, hi Matt, if you ever listen to this, he was like, dude, I'm getting a drum set for Christmas. And I was like, that's awesome. Because we like Nirvana Nevermind came out the year before, and that changed everyone's life, right? So we're all just like grunge, rock, whatever, early 90s. And
definitely.
And so he's like, you should get a guitar. We'll start a band. And I was like, yep, let's do this. And so I had just found Nirvana. I was just about to find Fugazi, right? And so I was like, yeah, for sure. So I tell my parents, all I want is just an electric guitar, a shitty electric guitar and an amp, whatever. And so Christmas Day comes. What do I get? An acoustic. And I was like, oh, and they were, my mom's like, well, I just think that it would be good if you learn to play on, we talked to some people, and if you play on acoustic first, then you're really going to learn how to play guitar, and you're not just going to make it.
Right.
And she was fucking right, but like, it was really annoying when you're 12, because you're like, well, I'm trying to make noise with Matt. But the fact of the matter is, my mom, God bless her heart, she had the right idea. So she, starting at 12, I had an acoustic with a goal that if I did X, Y, and Z, maybe one day I could get an electric. And part of that was, and looking back, I'm so grateful, I started private lessons at 12. So I wasn't just like having acoustic and like plunking around or whatever. I went to a guy in Gloucester, Massachusetts. His name was Pete Mercurio, and a phenomenal guitar player. He was a guitar teacher. And I started that, and I started taking it seriously. I ended up going to the Berklee College of Music summer guitar sessions to enhance my guitar playing skill more and more. And so I learned the right way. But it's not. Yeah, it's no credit to my younger self. I did not want to learn the right way, But I ended up learning the right way because I had a great mom, and she made sure I did.
Yeah, those Berklee cats are serious. I had a former bandmate that went to the summer program and then went 2, if not 3 years to Berklee before they transferred more locally here to SEMO. But man, some of the videos they come back with, like the drum room in particular, I was like, my God, this is, you think you're good, or you think that you know some people that are good, but it's on a different level there at Berklee. I'll just have to tell you right now.
Yeah, it's a humbling experience. I came from a really small town. My graduating class was 39 kids, right? So, it's easy to be.
It's pretty on par with our area.
Yeah, so it's like it's easy to be the big fish in the small pond in that situation. And then you get tossed into Berklee, right? And it's literally an elite music college where people fly from all over the world to be able to go there.
Right.
And all of a sudden you go, never mind. Right. Just like I had to learn all those techniques to be in the metal band, it's like going to Berklee, it was like you learn all kinds of different disciplines. And grateful for that too. And I think it has really helped me think about guitar differently than maybe your average punk guy.
So what would you kind of consider some very formative albums that would eventually, I guess, distinguish what your overall music taste would be in the future? Like, what are some early albums that you remember like landing with you in particular?
Yeah, so Nirvana Nevermind is going to be number one. That's like why I wanted to play guitar, and I learned the record front to back. Not that it's hard, but I learned the record front to back. Shortly after the Blue Album by Weezer, I learned that. I loved that, and that was also like grunge era. And at the time, like I was just starting to kind of like find emo, and I had like the Buddy Holly glasses. So like when like that video came out,
Heck yeah.
I remember I got Windows 95, and on the Windows 95 disk, this is dating me so bad. I could not wait to like upgrade from Windows 3.11 to Windows 95. And in a little folder, they had the Buddy Holly Weezer video, as just because they wanted to showcase their media player's ability. And so they put the Weezer video on the CD, the install CD. And so that got
That's
me
cool.
hooked. Yeah. So there's that. And then as I got older, before I found like straight edge hardcore and had my crazy like straight edge guy phase, like before I found all that, my buddy was into Primus, Mr. Bungle, John Zorn, like all of these really like way like in the Pork Soda era, like Primus, like Mr. Crinkle, and like all of these like avant-garde, like especially comparatively to like Blink-182, right? Like all of these like more avant-garde records that like I kind of like didn't love at first, but I thought he was like a cool dude, so I gave him a chance. And then I ended up understanding them better, and that was informative too, and informative to my guitar playing. You know, I was a huge Dinosaur Jr. fan, still am.
Heck yeah.
Yeah, so all of that stuff was big, and then like messier, janglier, like yeah, that type of stuff.
That's wonderful. If you were to like choose 4 artists that you could only listen to their catalog for the rest of your life, what would be those 4 artists for you?
Oh my God, that's hard. All right, I mean, this is going to sound like a Fugazi podcast, but that's number 1.
I don't hate it. I love Fugazi.
Me too. Fugazi, Radiohead. A lot of varying opinions on Radiohead, but I love Radiohead.
Oh, I love him. Yeah. Who doesn't? It's the real question. Who doesn't love Radiohead?
I briefly dated a girl once, and I mentioned Radiohead, and she said, "Ew." And I'll let you guess how long that relationship lasted. Not much longer.
I was gonna say.
Yeah.
Didn't marry her, did you?
Get out of here. So that. Okay, so I've got that covered. I'm gonna need diversity. This is like when you have to pick 4 foods, right? Because I've got like I've got kind of like indie, like you would say Fugazi's like indie, but like slightly more irritating and like dissonant, and then Radiohead's a little bit more pleasant. And then I'm gonna need like some guilty pleasure music. They don't have like enough records for me. No, I know what I'll pick. The Get Up Kids would be in there.
Okay.
Yeah. And because like they've got a huge catalog, and I love everything from 4 Minute Mile through Guilt Show. Yeah. Okay, and then so I've got one more. I don't know what to pick. I feel like my life depends on this right now.
Well, don't put that much pressure on yourself. It's not worth it.
More of the same, but like the one I keep coming back to is Russian Circles. Like I'm a huge Russian Circles fan.
Okay.
Yeah, so maybe that.
Love it.
It's still like it's kind of a cop out because it's still just like dark indie type stuff, but I guess that's my bag. That or Manchester Orchestra. I fucking love Manchester Orchestra. So
they're great.
Yeah, it could be
they're great. Manchester Orchestra is like a really important band for me in particular, and it's a little hard sometimes just because of how emotionally heavy they've hit me at various times in my life. Like the whole Hope and Cope concept of those albums came out like when my dad passed away, so I listened to a lot of that at that time.
Yeah,
like honestly, it's amazing. But it's hard for me to go back and listen to it for those reasons, though, too. You know, it kind of takes you back to that time and place that, you know, that's what music does to a person. So, you know, they're incredibly important artists as well. And I know that we keep talking about Fugazi, but I have to crow a little bit. I came across a bootleg performance of theirs at a record store that we featured on the podcast once. So we were down there shopping, and I came across the 511, which the date stood out to me because it's not only my parents' wedding anniversary, but it was also my wedding anniversary, May 11th. Oh, cool. They had a 511 performance in 1989 in Texas, a bootleg VHS. And I just started doing like VHS projection showings for like my friends and their kids and stuff at our house. And I was like, you know, one of those nights that everybody filters out of here and one of my buddies stays over, I'm going to throw this on. So that opportunity happened here recently. And what an incredible performance as well. Like they're interviewing everybody outside of the show as well before and after. So they're getting like a lot of like fan cam footage and stuff. And it's kind of interesting to see that because, I mean, you see that a little bit on social media nowadays. You know, like I think a band that does a lot of that and does it very well because it adds to the humor and the likability of the band is Health. Like they like to go around and like, you know, shoot a lot of people before the shows and stuff. And kind of get an idea of like what kind of folks are coming out to their shows. But it was kind of a similar presentation. A lot of funny, quirky ongoings and things like that. So, yeah, man, that bootleg performance is incredible.
And Fugazi's great with like cataloging and all that stuff. They're almost like the Grateful Dead of like punk rock or something with that, with all the different bootlegs you can find and all that. It's amazing.
Yeah, I agree totally. And they always are a band infamously, and maybe people don't know this, they're kind of like anti-capitalistic. So they like weren't a band that was like about, constantly selling things of theirs, t-shirts, stuff like that, kind of infamously. So like anytime you can kind of come across those sorts of things, I think it's an extra special find for sure.
Yeah. There hasn't been anyone like him since.
Well, Jay, let's let the good folks know on the way out how to stay in touch with you best.
Sure.
I know we've talked a little bit about enlisting your production services, but also staying in tune with what Love Letter has going on. What's the best place for folks to follow you guys at?
Yeah, we're it's Love Letter HQ on Instagram is like probably the thing we have that's most active. So you can find that, and then or IODINE Recordings. They always know how to get a hold of us. So those are probably the best ways, at least at the moment. And then if you see us playing around, come to a show. The pre-orders, we're very fortunate. We're almost sold out before even the record comes out. So like the pre-orders
That's
are
awesome.
great. So I would recommend grabbing a record. Now, if you want one of the first pressings, those are pretty surefire going to sell out. Now is the time to grab one of those. Yeah, and again, you can grab those at IODINE Recordings as well. Yeah, just stay tuned. We just filmed a music video, which was really fun. We got some shows coming up, and record comes out the 28th. And yeah, we're pumped.
Well, of course, anybody that ever listens or watches our podcast, we're going to have everything in the episode details. We're going to have links to get hooked up with Love Letter and Jay in particular. So we'll have some stuff on there as well if you want to enlist his production services too, and or if you just want to learn from the massive amount of information that Jay has out there and the resources that he's provided everybody. Man, Jay, you're just a special guy in music, I think, and really a pleasure tonight getting to know you, and I think our fans will have the same feeling as well.
Well, thanks, man. This was a great conversation, and anytime anyone wants to talk to me about the things I love to talk about, I'm more than happy to do so.
You've been diagnosed! The symptoms make you choke on the air you breathe, loaded with guilt and shame, unstable empathy. Find the right pills and adjust the way you see. New age therapy scams have welcomed you with open arms. Validate with gaslight to empty your pockets, cause more confusion and irreparable harm. Social media feeds feed you memes and bullet points. Wellness pushes arm to the teeth, pushing placebo supplements and bullshit remedies. All of these offers come at you for a pretentious fee. Dig deep, research your anecdotal double speak till your fucking eyes bleed. I'm not like a sad, life is finite, unsteady and heavy. You can't own the damage when the damage owns you, so you better be ready. Can't clean deep cuts if you bleed it to the people you love. Find the bandage that fits. Your trauma doesn't mean shit till you learn to deal with it. Imprints on light blue with the letter K. Embossed white bars that read XANAX2. Tailored pharmaceutical fits to suit you, until the side effects rip you apart in the seams. Lucid dreams, detached and subdued. Self-destructive road tripping to self-reflection ghost tales. Vacation to the ends of the brain's capacity to find there's no vacancies. Reach for the tools to slow your breathing. Apologize to the ones you mistreated. Anything to keep your heart from exploding. I'm not like a snake, life is finite, unsteady and heavy. You can't own the damage when the damage owns you, so you better be ready. Can't clean deep cuts if you're bleeding through the people you love. Find the bandage that fits. Your trauma doesn't make sense till you learn to deal with it. On your knees. On your knees to fix collapse. child, you! Let's win! Oh shit! Let's win! Oh shit! Let's win! When the champion comes, you!
Hey, this is Barrett from the ATI Podcast. Episodically, I will be chatting with a featured guest bringing a spotlight to their craft. Artists, musicians, filmmakers, actors, small businesses, athletes. Nothing is out of bounds. Hear my discussion with rising talents and entrepreneurs across all traditional podcasting platforms, as well as YouTube. Like what you hear? Be sure to subscribe to the podcast channel of your choice, whether that's Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Amazon Music, and more. Just click the subscribe button and leave us a 5-star rating. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube, where you can get full video episodes of the ATI Podcast and see our guests in their work. Stay in touch with our ongoings, events, and guest lists across all major social media outlets: Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, X. Just search the ATI Podcast. We would like to thank you all for your continued support, and as always, stay safe out there. Hey there, this is Barrett from the ATI Podcast, here to talk about what we have going on the ATI Podcast Network. First, we'll start with Waxing On with R&J. The format of Waxing On with R&J is audible selections made exclusively by our hosts and brothers, Ridge Jackson and Jake Jackson. Waxing On with R&J is sure to tickle your inner eardrums with some of the most vile tones you've ever encountered, and conversely, ear candy with pop melodies, focusing on spotlighting underground and rising artists. Waxing On with R&J is another outlet of the ATI Podcast community to bring awareness to many musicians' craft. Also found on the ATI Podcast Network, Nod Narb's Closet, hosted by Brandon Stewart of Edos Inn. Nod Narb's Closet is a wing of the ATI Podcast programming that delves into the world of roleplay games, miniature painting, diorama making, occasional pro wrestling match watch-alongs, providing commentary with a dash of jocularity and satire, and much, much more. Of course, leading the pack is the ATI Podcast. On the ATI Podcast, we episodically invite guests onto our show to spotlight their talents, whether that's musicians, filmmakers, artists, actors, businesses, even athletes. Nothing is off the table. The focus of the ATI Podcast and its collective creative arms, whether that's Waxing On with R&J or Nod Narb's Closet, is to bring awareness and focus to people's talents. Be sure to follow us across all traditional podcasting platforms, and for the full experience, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Just search the ATI Podcast. Stay safe out there.